Okay, let's be honest. Interviews, networking events, they can be pretty nerve-wracking for anyone. But what if there's a way to, like, not just fake it till you make it, but actually cultivate real confidence? That's what we're diving into today. We're taking a deep dive into an episode of the Resilience Podcast, all about excelling in interviews and networking. That's some really fascinating insights, and we're going to unpack all of that with you. Plus, we have a real-life success story, and this story really shows just how powerful this stuff can be.
You know, when I was listening to that episode, the thing that really struck me was they talked about the difference between just feeling confident and actually being resilient. It's not just about putting on a brave face, right? It's about having the tools to actually navigate those times when you have self-doubt and to come out stronger on the other side.
That's a really great point, because it's easy to think of confidence as like you either have it or you don't, this fixed kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the Resilience Podcast, they paint a different picture. They argue that real confidence is about trusting your ability to adapt, to learn, especially when things get a little bit, messy. It's kind of like, okay, I might not have all the answers right now, but I can handle whatever comes my way.
Exactly. And that's where I think the resilience comes in, being able to bounce back from those setbacks, to learn from the moments when you might stumble, when you feel unprepared. Think about it like in an interview. Maybe you get hit with a question that totally throws you off, or you're at a networking event and you completely blank on someone's name. That's where the resilience kicks in. It allows you to acknowledge, okay, that happened, take a breath, and keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's like having that inner voice that says, okay, yeah, that happened, but I'm not going to let it derail me.
Yeah.
I know I've definitely had those moments where my inner critic starts to go crazy. And learning to reframe those as opportunities to grow, it's been huge for me.
Absolutely. And speaking of turning challenges into triumphs, the podcast featured this amazing story about this recent graduate named Amara, who used to be absolutely terrified of interviews, but she completely transformed her approach and ended up landing her dream job. It's just a fantastic example of how we can actively build both confidence and resilience.
Okay, I am hooked. Tell me everything. How did she go from interview anxiety to, like, interview superstar?
So, at first, Amara would get so nervous she would just freeze up, which obviously didn't lead to the best interview performances. But she realized she couldn't keep letting fear control her, so she decided to really approach the whole thing strategically. She started by really looking into, the psychology behind confidence. She realized that in order to change how she acted, she needed to change what she believed about herself.
Yeah, that's so powerful, the way our thoughts can impact how we act. So what did that internal shift look like for her?
Well, she used this framework from the Resilience Podcast. It's called the ABC model. It stands for adversity, belief, consequence. So let's break it down. The adversity was the interview itself, the situation that triggered that anxiety. Her belief was that she wasn't good at interviews, that she would mess up and people would judge her. And then the consequence of that belief was she would freeze up and not perform well.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
But how do you break free from that cycle?
That's where the real work comes in. Amara knew she needed to challenge those negative beliefs she had and replace them with ones that were more empowering. So she started by focusing on preparation, researching those common interview questions, practicing her answers out loud. She even recorded herself so she could see what she needed to improve on. And as she felt more prepared, her belief in her own abilities started to grow.
So preparation was like the first defense against those doubts. It makes sense, right? If you know you've put in the work,
Yeah.
you're less likely to let those negative thoughts take over.
Exactly. But she didn't stop there. She also started using visualization techniques, just spending a few minutes each day imagining herself walking into that interview room, feeling confident, engaging in the conversation, answering questions with ease, like a mental rehearsal, training her mind to expect a positive outcome.
It's so fascinating how powerful our minds can be. If we keep feeding ourselves those negative thoughts, we're more likely to see those outcomes happen. But if we can shift our focus and start visualizing success, it can really change how we act.
And you know what? It worked. Amara went into her next interview feeling calmer, more prepared than she ever felt before. And even though she didn't get every single question perfectly, her confidence and her authenticity really shone through. She connected with the interviewers on a human level. And guess what? She got the job offer.
I love that. It's so inspiring. It shows that confidence isn't something you're just born with. It's a skill. You can learn it and strengthen it if you have the right tools and the right mindset.
Absolutely. And this whole idea of actively building resilience is something the Resilience podcast really emphasizes. In fact, they have this great exercise to help listeners reframe self-doubt. And I think it's something we could all benefit from, especially when we're thinking about things like interviews or those networking events.
All right, I'm all for a little self-reflection. Walk me through it. What's the first step?
So they suggest starting by thinking about a time where you felt really nervous or unsure. Maybe it was an interview, a presentation, or even just a difficult conversation you had. And don't just skim over it. Try to really put yourself back in that moment. What were you feeling? What were you thinking? What was the overall vibe?
So tapping into those memories and emotions. Sometimes we try to just bury those experiences, but there's so much we can learn from them. Okay, so we've set the scene. What's next?
All right. Now grab a pen and paper or even just your phone. Open up the Notes app and jot down 3 things. First, what specifically made you nervous in that situation? Was it the fear of failing, or maybe feeling unprepared, or feeling judged by other people? When you pinpoint what's making you anxious, it can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, like shining a light on those fears,
Yeah.
bringing them to the surface so we can actually deal with them.
Exactly. Okay, the next thing. Try to remember what went well in that situation, even if it felt tough overall. Did you answer one question really well? Did you connect with someone even though you felt nervous? Even in those tough times, there are usually little glimmers of success that we can learn from.
That's so true. It's easy to focus on what went wrong, but actually looking for those bright spots, those times where we surprised ourselves, that's where the real growth happens.
I completely agree. Okay, last step in this reflection exercise. Think about what you learned from that experience, no matter how it turned out. Did you gain any insights? Did you find a skill you want to work on? Did you discover a coping mechanism that helped you manage your nerves?
Even those times that feel like total failures can teach us so much. It's all about shifting how we see things and seeing those setbacks as stepping stones on the path to growing.
And that's the beauty of resilience. It's not about avoiding the challenges, it's about learning how to move through them and come out stronger on the other side. And this is actually a perfect transition because the Resilience podcast doesn't just give us these exercises to reflect, they also give some really practical tips for building confidence and resilience in those interview and networking situations.
Okay, I am ready for those tips. Let's hear them. Okay, so we've talked about mindset, but how about some tangible things we can do to amp up our confidence and resilience when it comes to those nerve-wracking interviews and networking events? The Resilience podcast had a bunch of tips. What really jumped out at you?
Well, they start with something fundamental, and I think it's something we all need reminding of. Preparation is key. I know, it sounds obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. People going into interviews or networking events without putting in the work beforehand, and then they wonder why they're not feeling confident.
It's like showing up for a marathon without any training, right? You're not setting yourself up for success. So tell me, what does good preparation look like according to the podcast?
They break it down into a few areas. First, research, whether it's an interview or a networking event. Take some time to learn about the company, the industry, the people you're going to be talking to. Having that knowledge not only gives you things to talk about, but it helps you feel more in control.
Makes sense. You walk in feeling like you understand what's going on, less likely to be thrown off. What else?
Next, think about your own experience and skills. And I don't just mean skimming your resume right before. Take the time to actually reflect on your accomplishments, your strengths, what makes you unique. You might even want to write down a few key points, just to have them fresh in your mind.
Like a mental cheat sheet. But sometimes I find that over-preparing makes me even more anxious. Like I get caught up in trying to memorize answers, and then I lose that natural, authentic feel.
Did the Resilience podcast talk about that at all?
Yeah, they actually did, and they made a great point. Preparation is essential, but you've got to find a balance between structure and being spontaneous. You don't want to sound like a robot, but you also don't want to be caught completely off guard.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're prepared, but you can still be yourself and have a genuine conversation.
Exactly. And that leads right into their next tip, which might sound a little counterintuitive. Focus on connecting with people, not on trying to impress them. Interesting, because it's so easy to get caught up in wanting to wow people, especially in those situations where you feel like you're being judged. But how do you actually shift your focus to connection?
Well, the podcast talked about Bringing that authenticity to every interaction, instead of thinking of it as a performance, think of it as a chance to connect with another person. Ask open-ended questions, really listen to their answers, and share your own experiences and thoughts in a genuine way.
So it's about taking the pressure off yourself and just trying to build rapport and find some common ground.
Exactly. They gave some examples, like ask about the other person's career path, or what they like to do outside of work, or even their take on something happening in the industry. Just show genuine curiosity and create a comfortable space for both of you to share.
Creating a dialogue instead of a monologue. I like that. Okay, so we've prepped, we're focused on connecting, but let's be real, those nerves are still going to pop up. What did the Resilience podcast say about dealing with anxiety in the moment?
They had a whole section on what they call grounding techniques. These are things you can use right then and there to calm your nervous system down, bring you back to the present moment. And these techniques are backed by science. When we get anxious, our fight or flight response kicks in. And these grounding techniques help activate the part of our nervous system that promotes relaxation and calm.
So like an emergency brake for your anxiety. I'm into it. Give me an example, something we can try right now.
One of the easiest and most effective is deep breathing. When you feel that anxiety creeping up, take a few slow, deep breaths. Focus on the feeling of the air going in and out. You can even count your breaths in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, like hitting pause on that anxiety spiral.
Okay, I'm already feeling more relaxed. I know I tend to hold my breath when I get stressed, so that's a good reminder. What else?
They also talked about using your senses. When you feel overwhelmed, just take a moment to notice what's around you. What do you see, hear, smell, feel? It helps shift your attention away from those racing thoughts. Brings you back to the present.
Like grounding yourself in your surroundings, especially helpful in those situations where you might feel like you're kind of floating outside of your body.
Exactly. And here's one I use all the time. Positive self-talk. Instead of letting that inner critic take over, try to replace those negative thoughts with affirmations. Things like, I'm prepared for this, I'm capable, I'm worthy. It might sound cheesy, but it really works.
I've heard that our brains believe what we tell them over and over. So if we keep saying negative things to ourselves, no wonder we feel anxious and insecure. But if we can make a conscious effort to use more positive and empowering language, it can actually rewire our brains over time.
Totally. And these techniques aren't just for interviews and networking. They're great for dealing with stress and anxiety in general.
It's like having a toolkit for resilience that you can take anywhere. Okay, so we've got prep, connection, grounding techniques. What was the last piece of advice from the Resilience podcast?
Their final tip was about following up. And they didn't just mean sending a generic thank you note. They talked about using follow-ups to really strengthen those connections and leave a lasting impression.
So important, but I'm definitely guilty of forgetting to do it.
They recommended sending a personal message within 24 hours of the interaction, whether it was an interview or a networking event. And instead of just saying thank you, mention something specific you learned. Reiterate your interest and offer to stay in touch.
Showing that you were listening and that you value their time. I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Preparation, connection, grounding techniques, follow-ups. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what are some of your go-to strategies for staying resilient under pressure?
That's a good one. I think one of the most powerful things is cultivating a growth mindset. Instead of seeing challenges as setbacks, see them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Embracing those moments of discomfort as stepping stones to progress.
Yes, exactly. And something else that's helped me a lot is surrounding myself with a supportive community. People who encourage me, who remind me of my strengths. We don't have to go through these things alone.
Having a network of cheerleaders and mentors
to
help you stay motivated and resilient when things get tough.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered the practical stuff. But the Resilience podcast went deeper than that, right? They talked about the meaning and purpose behind building confidence and resilience.
Yeah, they did. Their closing message really resonated with me. Ready to explore those final takeaways?
I am. Let's hear it.
You know, at the end of the episode, they really emphasized this idea that confidence isn't like this magical finish line where you suddenly don't have any fear or self-doubt anymore. It's an ongoing thing, a journey of constantly learning and adapting and bouncing back when things don't go your way.
So it's not about reaching this destination called confidence. It's about embracing the journey itself, knowing that there are going to be bumps along the way. Exactly. And they made a great point about how confidence and resilience are really connected. The more we step outside our comfort zones, the more we face those challenges head on, the more we build up that inner strength, the strength that helps us handle whatever life throws at us.
Yeah, like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But I think the Resilience podcast takes it a step further. It's not just about surviving, it's about using those challenges to actually learn and grow from them.
Exactly. And they also reminded us that we don't have to do this alone. Building a supportive community around us, people who believe in us, encourage us, and challenge us. That's so important for building both confidence and resilience.
Like having a network of cheerleaders and mentors and
People who keep you accountable to help you stay on track and celebrate your wins. Absolutely. And that's something I really appreciate about the Resilience podcast. They create this space where it's okay to be vulnerable and where growth is celebrated. They remind us that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to mess up, it's okay to feel those nerves. What really matters is that we keep learning, keep growing, and keep moving forward.
embracing the imperfections of the journey, and realizing that even those moments of doubt can teach us something. Well, this deep dive has been so insightful. We've talked about the psychology of confidence, unpacked practical strategies for building resilience, and even done a little self-reflection.
A real journey of self-discovery. And we've discovered some amazing tools that you, our listener, can start using right now to tackle those interviews, networking events, or anything that takes you out of your comfort zone with more confidence and resilience.
Absolutely. So as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with one last thought. We focused on specific situations, but I think the real power of what we've talked about today is in applying these principles to our everyday lives.
I love that. It's about seeing every interaction, every challenge, every opportunity as a chance to build your confidence and resilience.
Exactly. So as you go through your day, your week, your life, I want you to look for those little moments where you can choose courage instead of comfort, growth instead of staying stuck, connection instead of isolation.
Maybe it's speaking up at work when you usually wouldn't, or taking on a project that pushes you, or just saying hi to someone new.
Those little acts of bravery, those times when you choose to push yourself a little bit, those are the things that build lasting confidence and resilience.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be good days and bad days, days when you feel amazing and days when you doubt everything. The key is to keep showing up, keep learning, and keep embracing the process of becoming the most confident and resilient version of yourself.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into resilience and confidence. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep diving deep.